Welcome, everyone, to Spook doodles, a podcast about the fun side of horror. My name is Luryak, my pronouns are he, him, and these are my co-hosts.
My name is Freud. My pronouns are he, him.
My name is Possum. My pronouns are they and him.
Alright, so this month we're discussing an early 90s movie that feels very 80s called The People Under the Stairs. This episode is going to have a slight content warning. There's a lot of children being threatened with violence. There's themes of child abuse in the movie, and there are a few racial slurs, but it's mostly the first thing. There's no sexual component to the abuse, but there's a couple of scenes that if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, we're going to be talking about it, and if you watch the film, you might want to brace yourself for it. But having said that, let us move on. So, very quick, the premise of this movie, because this is not a movie so much about plot as it is about premise. The premise of this movie is that a young boy called Fool finds out that his family is about to be evicted because they can't pay their rent. So a friend of the family called Leroy then suggests that Fool should join him and his associate in robbing the landlords. And he says, the landlords have been unfair to you. Now it's time to get your cut to help your family. And they send him out to case the house. And then things start getting a little insane as we find out this family of landlords is not what they appear to be on the outside.
Yeah, and they appear to be pretty horrible people.
Yeah, no, they look like very heartless, racist, typical greedy landlords. But as the movie unfolds, we find out there's much more wrong with them than that. So this movie is very much about the characters. Of course, Fool being the highlight, the central character. He is the protagonist. But yeah, every character in this movie is memorable, even the ones who don't have many lines. What do you guys want to say about that?
I think you're right. I mean, this is a great example of a character-driven movie. Just like you said, there's not a whole lot. It's not that there isn't a plot. It's just the plot's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's for most of the movie, there's the premise, and then crazy things happen, and then more plot comes in. But yeah, it's about the characters.
Mm-hmm. And the characters really, if they weren't this strong, the movie just wouldn't work. It would be completely boring. It just wouldn't be interesting to watch. And you have all of the juxtaposition between the grounded characters like Fool and the people in his family, and the much over the top, larger than life characters of the landlords is I think that works so well. Just making them cartoonishly evil, yeah, it just really works.
And then you have Leroy and his friend, whose name I forget. Do you remember Leroy's friend's name?
Spencer.
Yeah, Spencer. Those two are a little bit in between. They're a little bit like the thieves in Home Alone, just more likable, They're a little cartoony, and they have some weird one-liners.
They do.
They're very brash, and they seem to think being a robber is like a career.
Yeah.
So they're a little strange, but they're sort of the middle ground between Fool and his family, who are basically normal, and these antagonists who are just ridiculous movie characters who could never exist in real life. What they represent is very real, but there's nobody like that.
I was just gonna say, Fool. We start off very obviously with Fool is the Fool from Tarot.
Right. The movie opens with a tarot reading scene, which essentially lays out Fool's entire character arc. Because he's just turned 13, although he looks younger than 13. He looks like he's 11, maybe. But the character is 13.
It makes me wonder then, do the other characters, are they also archetypal?
I would say Leroy is a treasure hunter character. When he finds I don't know if that's a tarot thing, but he he very noticeably calls the loot he's going to steal treasure, and the documents he used to find out that the gold coins, because that's what they're after, he calls that a treasure map. So he's a robber by trade, but I think he's meant to be more like a Han Solo type of robber than a more modern, realistic robber. Like, at least that's how he sees himself, anyway.
That actually plays into what you said earlier about them sort of being that middle ground between the grounded characters and the like super cartoonish characters. Like, he is a grounded character who wants to be like an adventurer. He wants to save people. Maybe he just wants to get the money for himself, but he wants something more, and he wants something more in a way that kind of elevates him to more of that fairy tale kind of.
Yeah, we'll get to
lifestyle.
the fairy tale stuff, but Leroy, Spencer not so much, because he doesn't get to do or say much before being taken out. But Spencer and Leroy are slightly larger than life, and they're quite memorable. Leroy actually dies basically at the end of the first act, which, spoilers, but even though he isn't in much of the movie, he's very memorable. He's wearing what do you call those hats? Those African fashion hats? A what?
No, Leroy's wearing, I can't remember what the hat's called, but he is also wearing a dashiki.
Yes. And, he's very matter-of-fact about how he speaks. Like, when he's trying to convince Fool to help, he doesn't, try to lure him with the appeal of the treasure. Smartly, he's trying to guilt him into it. He's saying, look, your mom can't do anything. She's sick, and you're about to be evicted. You have to step up. You have to be the man of the house.
And it's really interesting, because that is pretty much exactly the way that young kids get into gangs.
Yes.
It's because someone shows up, says, hey, your life is out of your control right now. I can give you some of that control back. You just have to do exactly what I tell you to do. And, what kid would say no to that?
And Leroy, if you don't know what the movie is going to be about, and until you see more of the landlords, you might think he's the bad guy. Because he's, guilting this kid into doing something illegal. He puts him in a mild amount of danger by having him be the one casing the house. And he says some stuff that's a little, let's just say it's not PC. But, by the time the movie unfolds, you realize, no, he's not a bad guy. He's not a perfect person, but he's not the villain of the movie. Definitely. And he's probably a good guy deep down. Because when he finds out his friend Spencer has been killed, he's just scared. And then when he gets killed, his last words are, run, fool, get out. He's more worried about the kid than he is about the fact that he's being shot to death, So, the movie is somewhat subversive. Sure, depending on your prejudices, you might not think of him as a bad guy, but he is coded ambiguously for the first moments of the movie, I think. And then as the movie unfolds, you start to realize, no, he's not the villain. The landlords are the villains.
I could see him being the magician. Card, since it's kind of a teacher of sort of this forbidden knowledge.
Yeah.
And I linked the website to you all. It has the card that I think these are the actual tarot pictures they use from the movie, because the Fool matches the one that they show. And the magician,
that's the
vest,
the classical.
The vest on the magician almost reminds me of Leroy's outfit that we were talking about a little bit. Just because he was sort of a vest, right? Or am I misremembering?
No, Leroy was wearing a dashiki.
Okay. But I would kind of wonder whether he might be the wizard in this.
He might. As we'll say later, I think the tarot stuff is more of a framing device, because when you break down the movie, the archetypes of the characters and the themes and the plot beats are more fairy tale than they are tarot. But
I wish I knew more about tarot. That's one gap in my occult knowledge that really would have been helpful here.
I don't know squat about this stuff. I only have surface level knowledge about tarot readings and horoscopes and the faceless hero and all that kind of stuff. But the movie doesn't need you to be an expert in this stuff to get it. You get the tarot reading, You're gonna face death. You're gonna face this. You gotta walk right into the sun. Boom. The sister is basically like she basically doesn't do much other than give the tarot reading. She does come back at the end of the movie to pull her weight, which we'll get to. But basically, she and Leroy are the characters who set Fool out on their journey, on his journey, and then we meet the other characters. So we've talked about them a bit, but let's lay down the landlords. So right away, when we see them, their house is bolted down. There's bars in the windows. They look like the Reagans. They look very on purpose like Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan. And they seem to hate everyone. And they have a daughter, or so it seems. And they're very strict with her. The first scene we see her in, the mother character, the woman landlord, she threatens to punish her severely. We don't know how, because she might have dropped a fork and lost it. Like, you lost silverware, you know the punishment for losing silverware. And then a weird hand comes out of the wall and gives the daughter the silverware. And then we come back to that weird hand in the walls later, but right away you know there's something very wrong with these people other than just being greedy. Like, they're not normal.
Even before the fork,
yeah,
she comes to get the food from, she brought dinner to her daughter, and she comes to get the plate, and she says about the plate, "You didn't lick this, did you?" That is also a huge hint that something is very wrong here.
Yeah.
Because, like, why would you care? Wouldn't you want your kid to lick the plate if your food was that good? It really implies that they're also very strictly controlling this girl's weight.
Yes. And she's dressed all in white, and she's very obviously terrified. And, so they're weird controlling parents on top of being greedy landlords, because they're evicting a woman who's done.
Abusive.
Yeah, very quickly we find out they're abusive. The mother character brushes the daughter's hair very roughly, and then we find out they know about the hand in the walls, because the mother says she's been feeding that thing again, that thing in the walls. So that's a weird, mysterious... So they've got something living in the walls, so the house is very strange.
Totally
and then
normal. I always got in trouble for feeding the things in the walls when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, like it's like my dad used to say, if you feed that thing in the walls, you won't get no dessert. And but yeah, as the movie unfolds, we find out that these people are comically evil. Like they're racist, and not just like a little bit racist. They're very racist. They're classist. They're selfish, they're hateful, they're robbing the community. They're not just like greedy and taking money out. They're literally robbing the people and foreclosing the houses on purpose so they can turn them over. Like, and they make the living, like, they let the buildings go to shit so that like the property values go down and that it's impossible to live there. And they sell the buildings to, they're basically assholes. They're the worst kind of 80s yuppies. But it goes beyond that. Turns out that kid isn't their daughter. It's just a kid they took. And she wasn't the first one. And then it gets even weirder, because after Fool cases the house for Leroy, or attempts to, Spencer tries to case the house by posing as a delivery man. And he basically gets murderized, as we find out. Because the Nancy Reagan character immediately spots that he's a fake repairman or delivery man or whatever he's put. Repairman, isn't it? No, he's...
Yeah, gas...
gas or electric company guy.
He wants to check the meter, but he's like, oh no, there's another meter inside I need to check.
Yeah, but he's wearing a skull ring, and she immediately sees that ring and knows that he's full of shit. But when he says, look, I could call the cops and they get a court injunction to let me get in your house. She says, "Oh, well, come in then." And then next time we see him, he's dead. So
No, I wanted to talk about all of the strange, bizarre, like keeping up appearances sort of things that the landlords do.
Yes,
Like
there's
they are
there's a lot of
very,
that.
very, very focused on appearances. Like in that scene where we see the young girl when the dad is like taking off the belt, the mom says, "Don't hit her face,"
Yeah.
and like, "Don't shoot your gun outside," and like being very cordial and civil to anyone like off of their property. And like the one that stuck out to me the most was when we first see Daddy. He's eating dinner. He's eating a big hunk of meat, and he pulls out a piece of buckshot and spits it in a bowl, which is like almost full of buckshot. And like it's all about that keeping up appearances. He wants to look like a big hunter, but he doesn't know how to hunt for shit. If he knew what he was doing, he wouldn't have to deal with picking buckshot out of his meat. But like it's that kind of, you know,
Yeah, he represent.
masculinity that he has to project.
Importantly, it establishes he's a bad shot.
Oh yeah, that comes
Oh
into
yeah,
play.
he really is.
He shoots so many times in the movie, and he hits like twice. But yeah, and strangely enough, even though the landlords live in the city, their street looks like the suburbs. So that whole keeping up appearances thing is very obvious commentary on the attitude of people living in affluent suburbs and who don't care about what happens in the city, even though
Oh
they're
yeah.
kind of in the city.
There are places in DC where if you walk one block over and you go
Absolutely.
straight from where it looks like a city to, oh, this is a tiny part of the suburbs people have transplanted in here because they don't want to
Yes.
deal with living in the city.
Urban sprawl areas are like that. Like the town I live in, like I get on my bike, 5 minutes in, I'm in a school district with beautiful suburb-like buildings and houses and duplexes. Then I pedal my bike 5 minutes, and then I'm in basically the ghetto. And like it's all like
Yep.
really tall apartment complexes, and everybody's very poor, and it's very strange.
And it makes it funny later on when, the landlords are complaining about the city that they live in, the area and the neighborhood they live in. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you shouldn't have come here.
they say, "Oh, it's like we're the prisoners and the criminals are running free." They say that to police officers, and the police, of course, agree with them because they're police.
Yeah.
But like the irony of people who have imprisoned children in their house saying that.
Right, in that scene, as they're saying that, Fool is actually banging on the window trying to get the police's attention.
Yeah, and as I said during the screening, like, gee, I wonder if the police in this obviously political allegory film are going to save our black protagonists from these evil landlords. Of course
Yep.
they don't. That would
I mean,
that.
at least they just do nothing instead of
Yeah, no,
actively making the situation worse.
they're not like comically bad, but like the movie clearly doesn't think much of the cops in situations
Oh
like
yeah.
this. And later CPS shows up, and again, that's a keeping up appearances thing, because they receive CPS and they're like, "Oh, there has never been a child in this house," and they serve them scones and cookies, and they're very polite, and they come across like an affluent white couple, so CPS is like, "Oh, these people seem fine. Must have been a crank call."
When they do find Alice's room, they put on this bullshit story like, our dear daughter left us and we've just never touched her room, and they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry for you," when it's obvious bullshit. They just lied.
You could totally imagine that, like, if the landlords had called the cops on Leroy and Fool, the authorities would not have been nearly as sympathetic to their stories.
Oh no, absolutely not.
They don't make too much of a point of that, but they don't need to say it, like it's obvious in the different ways they act. But yeah,
See, like that's something this movie, I wouldn't say that it's subtle, but it's also not ham-fisted.
yeah,
It's direct.
it's not subtle at all, but it trusts you to keep up. Like the landlord couple are racist. but they only say racial comments maybe 3 times in the movie. They say the N word one time. They say something about fool being black another time. And
they want to have clean people move in, which is another dog whistle.
Yeah, and then later there's an interrupted N word, which is a very satisfying moment in the film. And but it's not like constant. They don't need to remind you they're racist every 5 seconds. You get it.
I would say it's a thing of like less unsubtle than it is. It's just uncomplicated. It's just like these are
like
the
I said, direct.
They are just pure.
It's
evil.
very straight.
Yeah, this is the cop. These are the cops. They don't do anything. This is CPS. They don't do anything. They don't add more onto it. They're just like this. They just present it frankly, even as they are slightly caricatures.
Okay, so let's talk about Alice briefly. She's very much a damsel in distress, so she doesn't get much to do, but she's still very well characterized. She's very scared of punishment. She says that the reason she gets to live upstairs, unlike the thing in the walls and the people under the stairs, which we'll get to, is that she hears no evil, sees no evil, and speaks no evil. But she's very clearly still a good person who wants to help Fool and who doesn't not in any way deserve the ill treatment she's receiving. So you really feel for her, and the actress is really good at conveying like a completely traumatized child who's still a good person and wants to do right as much as they're scared, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like, you can tell that she doesn't want to play along. She's doing it because she has to survive.
Absolutely.
And she is very, very traumatized by this.
But yeah, that's basically all the major characters covered. To briefly, I suppose we should. Oh, sorry.
The hand in the wall character.
Right. So yeah, let's get to that. So the reason this movie is called The People Under the Stairs is that Alice gets to live in the nice room, but these people have kidnapped many other children, and when the children failed them, quote, Daddy cuts the evil out of them, which I'm assuming is meant to be their tongue or their eyes or whatever they use to sin. And these evil landlords are very much religious people. They keep telling people to go to burn in hell, and they talk about the Lord a lot. They're meant to represent, among other things, the Christians who are just use their Christianity to be awful. And yeah, so there's a bunch of children living in the basement, which has like a sliding staircase, which you can't get out of it. And it seems the only food they're fed is when intruders are thrown down in the basement. They have to survive on human meat. So they're basically they're basically almost like mole people down there. They haven't seen the sunlight in years. They don't get any education. They barely get any food. And one of them, called Roach, has managed to sneak out of the basement and get into the walls. And the couple hate him for it, for having some kind of freedom. And they repeatedly try to kill him just for that. So yeah, those are the people under the stairs. When you first meet them, you don't know what they are, but you find out that they're children. Abused children that were so abused that they've barely got any humanity left. And yet, they're not the monsters. The parents are.
Yeah, because they didn't choose to be in this situation. They were forced into it by the landlord and the landlady, who call each other mommy and daddy, which is super gross, but also another direct Reagan reference.
Yeah, Reagan famously called his wife mother, which is...
yeah, for our younger listeners, if you want to really learn some stuff about Reagan,
That's weird, but he's not the only one. Recent Vice President Mike Pence also did that. So it's very much a religious right thing in the States to...
very normal. Focus, that's what we're saying.
As the org is called, focus on the family.
I was gonna ask, do we think that the people under the stairs do they represent like a certain group, or
they represent the underclass, the downtrodden in general? But we'll get to that.
It's interesting because we have them as the representation, but then we also literally have
there's
and Leroy.
Yeah, there's multiple layers in this movie, which we'll get to, but like So a lot of the movie is after Spencer fails to case the house and doesn't come back out. Leroy and Fool break in, and basically there's an hour-long action sequence which is only occasionally broken up, where Fool and Leroy are running all over the place in the house trying to get out. At first they're trying to find treasure, then they're trying to get out, then they're trying to avoid a dog, then they're trying to avoid Daddy, who's for no reason that we're told, gets dressed up as a gimp to try to shoot them with his shotgun. I mean, I guess it's good.
I know the reason.
Yeah, because he gets off on it.
Yeah, he gets a boner.
Well, I have that reason, but I also the Death Tarot card. He's wearing that black body armor. That's what made me think. I think that everybody is archetypal.
That's good.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good. He does sort of look like a Black Knight in that outfit. A Dark Knight.
It's it's obviously a hilarious inversion on it, but
oh sure. I mean,
I wonder if maybe him being such a bad shot is because he's wearing a fucking gimp mask. And you can't see.
It's like a stormtrooper.
It does not help.
Yeah.
Leroy gets taken out when he's startled by a thing in the walls, who was probably trying to help him, to be fair to the thing in the walls. To Roach.
If it was Roach, then yes. If it wasn't, then it was probably trying to eat him.
Yeah, well, Roach is the only one who seems to have figured out how to get upstairs, so I'm pretty sure it was him. But yeah, the hand comes out and startles him, and he comes out, and for the first and last time in the movie, Daddy actually lands a shot and shoots poor Leroy in the chest. And then Fool hides. Fool is chased by the dog. Is chased by the dad. They get caught. There's a very upsetting scene where after being made to clean Leroy's blood off the floor, Alice is yelled at for getting her dress filthy, which is like, you made her kneel in blood. Of course her dress is filthy. But the mommy character picks her up and dunks her in what appears to be like scalding hot bathwater, and she's just...
this was a rough scene to watch.
She's just screaming, and it's a movie. It was just regular temperature water with dry ice in it, and the kid was acting.
But they put makeup on her in the next scene to make her skin look red, which is just like, that's a great attention to detail, and I hate it.
Yeah. This is not a very gory movie, but that scene is like, you need to brace yourself for that scene, because the rest of the movie is quite fun despite the themes of child abuse, and most of the violence is manageable, but that scene is very much like, ooh, you imagine someone doing that to a real child and it makes your skin crawl. It's rough.
It's the first and
very brief.
It's the first and only time that we see it directly happen to her.
No, but emotionally gruesome.
So yeah, there's a dog who's called Prince, and he's very obviously been trained to eat people. He gets fed Spencer's hand as a treat at one point.
And he barfs up the ring.
Yeah, and he menaces our protagonist many times. Eventually, after this hour-long action sequence, Fool manages to not only escape, but he also manages to bring gold with him when he escapes. But unfortunately, Alice is stuck in the house still, and Roach gets killed, which is very sad. Everybody loves her.
Oh, yeah. So Roach gives him the money. I rewatched it right before the podcast, because this part does get kind of confusing.
Right.
A lot of stuff happens really quickly, but basically he and Roach escape after Roach is fatally wounded. I can't remember exactly what happened.
He got shot.
Oh, right. He gets shot. They escape into the walls. This is where Roach gives him some of the coins and then writes Alice's name on the wall, and then points up to where she is, and is basically saying, like, go save Alice. And then he dies there in front of Fool.
Fool tries to escape with Alice, but unfortunately Alice can't get out with him. But when Fool gets out, he finds out that the money he's got can pay his rent and his mother's operation, and the rent is going to be paid until like 2010, they say. Like it's
No, just 2000.
yeah, okay.
Just the year 2000, because that was so far away.
No, that's still 9 years of rent.
Oh yeah, no. I
Very
mean,
good.
it's just funny because 2000 sounds so futuristic back then, and well,
So Fool has escaped the danger and he's gotten his reward, but he knows that he has to go back in the evil castle and, save the girl, basically. And that's just what the tarot reading says at the start. You have to turn the other way and walk right into the sun. You have to become a man. And at this point, Fool becomes a man. And he does go back in there and he basically kicks the shit out of the bad guys with the help of the children in the basement. And
I do want to say that the ass kicking, incredible scene of Fool punching Daddy right in the dick.
he kicks
oh
him
yes,
in the dick.
no, he punches him.
Kicks him.
He punches
Yeah,
him
he
straight
punched him,
on in the
yeah.
balls. It's glorious.
Yeah. It's a wonderful scene.
I made sure to keep an eye out for that in this watch.
Very
But
cathartic.
we also forgot to mention one thing. When Fool leaves with the money and he finds, he's talking to I suppose another friend of the family who's helping them out. That friend of the family tells him more
Right.
about the landlords and about how they are brother and sister.
Which is disgusting.
Yes.
Just just give us another layer
which
of
is,
creepiness.
we'll get to what it means, but they're awful. They're just the worst. So that's more or less the movie. It's a lot of action, some scary parts, some sad parts, a bit of violence. It's only horror by default, I'd say, because it's a bit too intense
because
to be
there's
action.
Cannibalism.
Yeah, there's cannibalism. There's quite upsetting themes which are easier to swallow for horror fans, I'd say. You can't show this to somebody who likes Home Alone, even though it is like Home Alone at times. It's way more intense in some parts, But it feels almost like an action horror movie, really. And at times it's almost like a comedy. It's very much a whole package kind of film. But something else that I like about this film that I brought up multiple times is that it's essentially a fairy tale. And I've got all these reasons why it is. You guys feel free to jump in if I miss one. But yeah, you got Fool, your protagonist, who's on the cusp of manhood. He meets a treasure hunter, and they go inside a fortified castle to get what they literally call treasure using a treasure map. And the treasure is treasure.
I mean, they're literally gold. They're gold coins.
Yes, they're gold
what else
coins.
is treasure than gold coins?
Yeah, and there's a fearsome beast guarding the house, which you can think of as a dragon, but it's a dog. Everybody but Fool dies, which means he has to step up and become the hero, which is a very fairy tale kind of arc. There's the evil king and queen, and it turns out they're holding a princess captive in the highest tower of their castle, which is to say the second floor bedroom.
Yeah.
And once he gets out with the gold and has done his hero's journey, he has to go back to save that princess. And then by saving the princess and getting the treasure, not only him, but the entire neighborhood / kingdom is rewarded, which we'll get to how that happens. But there's also very many moments that feel like they're right out of something like The Princess Bride. So it turns out that in addition to the gold coins, these landlords have an insane amount of money in the basement in the treasure room. And Daddy talks about how he's counted the money many, many, many times. It's literally like something out of like a treasure room in a medieval movie that a king would have, It's bags of money, it's gold coins, it's artwork. And so that's already very fairy tale, but there's a scene where Fool very cleverly tricks Daddy into going in that treasure room by putting a bunch of the gold coins stuck in the wax of of candles on a chandelier, and he lights the candles.
Yeah.
So Daddy hears these coins falling. He's like, okay, this kid's in the treasure room fucking with coins, and he goes in and you must be counting them, huh? I do that a lot too, but no, it turns out it's just a chandelier, and then Fool basically gets the drop on him, and he's like, "Hey, I rigged this place to blow up."
That is a classic fairy tale.
Oh yeah.
It feels exactly like something out of The Princess Bride, honestly, or maybe
Like
Never Ending Story, movies like that.
where I would
Munchausen.
say I've where I would say I first got the feeling that it was a fairy tale was like right when they get trapped in the house and he ends up in the basement.
Right.
And it's that very quiet
It's
scene where he's just exploring this big dungeon and it
it's
almost seems like
literally
he
a
fell into
dungeon.
anon movie.
It's literally a dungeon, and then there's these creatures
Yes.
which turn out to be abused children, but he doesn't know that they could be anything for through his eyes. So they're like, they're like mole people or orcs or goblins or something. We barely see them. And they're like, ah, and they're cannibals too, which is very fairy tale like, man-eating monsters. And so yeah, it's literally a castle at that point. It has a freaking dungeon in it and a treasure room. But yeah, that scene is very much when it turns into a fairy tale. And yeah, the whole fairy tale theme helps some of the darker elements work better for me, because you get that they're a little allegorical, so you don't get too upset about them. But it also strengthens all the characters and character arcs. You're like, why are these characters so over the top? Well, it's a fairy tale. And why is he not going to the authorities? Well, it's a fairy tale. But also, it's social commentary. And like, it works on many levels because of the fairy tale thing, like connecting the reality and unreality of the story. It's like the glue that holds these two tones together, because sometimes it feels very real, like when he's seeing a sick mother and he's talking about not being able to make rent. Sometimes it feels ridiculous when a guy in a gimp suit is yelling and hooting and howling and shooting, and he's running through like an elaborate maze in the walls. Like, it's impossible. And like, there's so many rooms in that house, and they go through them, and it's never the same camera angles. It feels like 100 times bigger than it should be. But again, fairy tale. So yeah. Any other comments about the fairy tale stuff?
Well, it's a fairy tale and it's also very realistic as being from the point of view of a young child. Like a young child running around a big mansion like that, of course, it's going to seem like it goes on forever. You're tiny and the mansion is huge and like you're terrified, you're not paying attention to details and you're 11 or you're 13 years old. You know? Like I think a lot of the fairy tale aspect of it really fits when our point of view is from a character who is a child. Like what
Yes.
does he know right now? He knows his very harsh reality and he knows stories that are told to children. And like we kind of see those come together in this movie.
Yeah, and it's the story of a child becoming a man.
Yeah, of course a child would frame that in like frame that as a fairy tale because that's the kind of thing that they are taught.
Yes.
Like that's how character growth works.
I wanted to add to. I did a little bit more looking at the idea of tarot card representation. The girl, I'm almost certain, is Temperance. The character is wearing a white dress, exactly like the little girl. And then even in the description, it mentions how temperance has a double meaning of metals getting tempered, which means undergoing extremes of temperature, folding, and pounding.
Yeah,
Which
and
the abuse that she suffered.
without her as a driving force, Fool wouldn't have the same motivation to come back or be as heroic as he becomes. He'd just want to get out alive. I mean, they don't have a romance. They're still kids.
Yes.
And this is no time
No,
for
but
romance, but he cares about her as a human being. He feels bad for her.
because he knows that she's kind.
Yeah.
She shows him like that she's been helping Roach and that they're friends and that she's not just a damsel in distress. She's trying to live as best as she can as a good person in a horrific situation.
Yeah, and she ends up basically leading the uprising of the children under the stairs in the third act, where they basically eat mother.
Yeah.
Mommy, rather. Yeah.
Yes. And speaking of mommy, my last one, which I think is the most of the reach, but something that struck me with her character the costume design was her face was powdered like
right. She's
several
trying to be
shades
Oh
even
lighter,
yeah,
whiter.
which gets
yeah.
back to that racism, that sense of keeping up appearances and a facade, but also the Devil Tarot is an orange-skinned
Yeah,
devil
I
with a
think
bright
that
white
could be.
I think
face.
this would work
Goat
for
head, but
both mommy and daddy because then you get the BDSM thing
I
with the
think
chain
so,
around
yeah.
their necks.
And don't forget that
Yeah.
Yes.
her ridiculously exaggerated Nancy Reagan hair does kind of have the shape of those horns that the devil has.
Mm-hmm.
It could
Yeah.
be. It could be.
I legit think that there was the daddy thing with the black with death. I think is the one that makes me really think they were
It
looking at
very well
these
could
Well,
tarot
be.
for
you
the
know, a
characters.
character can also represent multiple things in multiple
Exactly.
scenes. So, like, Death could be Daddy, and then this could also be both
True.
of them
True.
together.
Yeah, well, and they're also the evil king and queen,
Mhm.
and they also literally represent what Reagan did to America, and they represent just
Oh, yes.
landlords in general.
Mhm.
Okay, so I guess we should get into the political and social commentary of this film. This movie is
Yes.
very much about race without making
Yeah.
too much of a big deal about being about race. Your protagonist is black. Leroy, his sort of mentor, is also black. His entire family is black, and the bad guys are white. But there's also good white people. Most of the children seem white. And at the very end of the movie, some of the characters who show up from the neighborhood to complain to the landlords are also white. Okay, so, it's not just a race thing, but race is definitely a huge part of it. And it's part of why...
But it's realistic about it.
Yeah, and it's part of why the bad guys take such glee in
Mhm.
trying to kill Leroy and Fool, because they're black intruders on top of just being intruders, and poor. They're black on top of that. And there's a wonderful line when Fool finds the treasure room with the insane amount of money. He says, "No wonder there's no money in the ghetto."
Yeah.
Because these fucking
Yeah,
white
it's all
people,
right there.
these fucking white landlords have hoarded it all. And the movie ends, I guess this is okay to spoil. The movie literally ends when Fool presses the button on the dynamite after warning Daddy, like, I don't want to kill you, but I will because you're really fucking annoying.
Yeah.
And the bad guy
Classic
just can't
movie
help
line.
himself and still tries to go attack Fool, and he hits the button, the dynamite blows up the bad guy, dumps him in the sewer, but also all the money in treasure room goes flying in the air and rains down on the neighborhood, literally redistributing the wealth. And
Yes.
even when it seems Fool is by himself
Yes.
and has no chance in the mansion, not only do the children come out of the basement to help him, Alice comes to help him, the whole neighborhood comes to protest the landlord's actions. So it's like, at first it's just the sister and the older man, and they're protesting, you've been running scams and letting these buildings go to shit to get people to move out. And when people get sick, because of your mistreatment, you use that to extort them and all this, predatory landlord stuff they've been doing. And I say, we're the community. And she says, I don't see any community here. All I see is a couple of, and then she almost drops a racial slur, and then a bunch of other people show up. Not all of them black, but a lot of them. So it's very much about class solidarity as well as it is about race. It is not subtle about it.
Oh no, and I'm glad it's not subtle about it because it doesn't need to be. When that's the reality, that many people live every day, why be subtle?
Yeah, but it's not so hit you over the head that it feels insulting like some movies. Like,
Right.
you don't need to spell it out. They
This
just show
movie
it.
has confidence in its audience that they will understand the message that they're trying to put forward.
Yeah. And since the bad guys are so obviously Reaganites, it's not just about landlords, it's about rich people in general. It's about Republican conservatives who prey on America by selling them lies.
Oh my god. I just realized something. When the money's raining down from the sky, that's the real trickle down economics.
Oh. And there's a very important moment where the kids who are stuck in the basement get out of the house, and they make cinema and the crowd celebrating that the money's raining down, because like these completely creepy underclass children, they're not your enemies. Like black and
They're still
white, they're not
people.
enemies. We're all in the same boat. There's just one enemy in the movie. And the movie makes sure you know that at the end, because everybody's on the same side celebrating that these fuckers have been killed,
I
basically.
actually had an idea for a metaphor of what the people under the stairs might represent. They represent the people who are sort of the most downtrodden by capitalism,
Yes,
like so much that you don't even see them as people anymore.
exactly.
Like the homeless, like
Or you don't see
the
them at all.
extremely poor, the disabled, the people who are
Yes.
just forgotten. And it's not their fault that they're like this. It's the direct fault of the system that they're trapped in.
Yeah, and people treat them like monsters. People are scared of drug addicts
Exactly.
and
Yes.
homeless, but they're not dangerous. They're on your side, basically, is what the movie's saying. That they're you. And the people you should be scared of are those who keep them under the stairs.
Yes.
Yes, and they're literally only kept alive by scraps
I
from
guess
the
we
same
forgot to
people
mention
who
this is a
were.
Wes Craven film.
Oh yeah.
Wes Craven, who
Yeah.
made Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream, among other great horror movies, he was not a kind of director who wanted to make the same movie over and over again. This is very different than a lot of his other movies, and considering it's a white guy directing who's from a comfortable background, directing a movie about race and class, it's done with an amazing amount of taste, and I wouldn't say subtlety, but like it's done the right way. It's not like patronizing or like
It feels real.
it feels very real. Like you'd never know a white guy directed this. You'd think this was Jordan Peele traveling back in time or something.
Yeah.
By the way, if Jordan Peele remakes this, I want to see it.
You
Oh
did.
fuck yeah. Oh my god.
Oh, yes. That'd be great. You did mention, and Possum had brought this up in a discussion before the podcast. The movie has confidence in its audience. The marketing,
Yeah.
maybe not so much,
So
particularly
I
in,
did
in
have a
bringing up
specific
what this movie is about.
I mean, it's not even like an experience with this movie. I just specifically remember as a kid who loved horror walking right past this video in the video store because the movie poster is just a picture of a house with like a smoky, cloudy skull over it. Absolutely tells
Yeah,
you
it
nothing
looks
about
like
the
every
movie.
other poster. It looks
And
exactly like the poster for Fright Night.
yeah, and like it tells me nothing, so I'm like, ah, yeah, whatever. So if I had known that this movie was this, I would
Yeah,
have loved it as a kid. If they had put Fool on the cover of this movie.
because how many movies, especially at the time, how many movies let you have a black star, let alone a black little kid star? Like, and in
And
horror, black
a
people were
black kid,
underrepresented.
a black kid in a poor neighborhood, and that's not it's not a movie just to be like, "Oh, look at the poor kid." Like he actually takes control of his situation. Like, fuck, I can really relate to this kid.
And he takes on evil white people. It's not just an intra-racial conflict. Like, it's like,
Like
no,
what if I was
he takes it
14
to his
years old?
enemies.
I really wish I had seen this when I was a kid. It would have been great. I probably would have gotten into film.
I wish I'd seen it too when I was younger, but it never got much marketing in general. People didn't have a
Yeah.
confidence that a movie about class and about race starring black people with a weird story would. And I think this it had been in production hell for a while because it's very, very 80s, but it came out in
I bet
91.
he would have trouble
Oh,
getting
by the
this
way,
produced.
Leroy's played by Ving Rhames.
Wait, was that Ving Rhames?
Yeah, Leroy was.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit!
Yeah. Yep.
Damn. He's so young in this. Oh, I keep saying that. Every time I watch a movie from the 80s or the 90s, I'm like, oh, they look so young. Yeah, because it was 30 years ago. I think that this movie is due for a revival. I think that it's
underseen.
It's still topical. It has aged very well.
It's timeless to me.
Yeah.
We have accepted that Halloween 3 is a good movie. Now let's move on to The People Under the Stairs.
Yeah.
The People Under the Stairs is better than Halloween 3. Come on.
Oh, it is. I would say yeah, but in terms of like audience appreciation and so on,
Halloween 3 is still the only Halloween movie I've ever seen.
Good.
Who the fuck is Michael Myers?
Well, he's the guy who's on the TV in that one scene in the bar. I did want to bring up just the other theme that I really thought about, and it came to me, Possum, when you mentioned keeping like up appearances, and it reminded me very much of like Southern Gothic style literature, like Flannery O'Connor, where the whole idea is her stuff is based in the South, but it's this idea of you put up an edifice, you put up a facade, and everything behind it is rotten and grotesque.
Absolutely.
The stories are often about the people who are trying to be very prim and proper, encountering an external grotesquerie that, pushes them out of their little prim and proper lives. They're like, oh, well, I never, or they get murdered. But it still just reminds me of that general, like, just this class and racial based facade of like, it's better to keep up appearances and do the right thing. Like we talked about Fool being, going back to save the girl. It's because he is an inherently good person. He's casing the joint to rob it at the beginning, and from the outside, it's like people will be like, "Oh yeah, that's delinquent behavior. That's really bad." But he has economic reasons to do it, and then when it comes down to it, he is actually willing to risk his life to help
trying
someone.
to save his sick mother.
Yes.
Yeah, like he's not doing it out of malice. Leroy tries to get him to get angry at the landlords, and he doesn't really care. It's only when he starts bringing up his mother and like the fact that he could provide for the family, that's what gets him into it.
Yeah, he's not doing this for revenge. Even at the end, after all the horrible things they've done to him, he says, I don't want to kill you. Like, he's a good kid. He does kill him, but the guy really gave him a choice. The movie makes a big point of how the authorities are useless. Like, the system isn't set up to help people like Fool. It's set up to help people like the villains. But yeah, great movie. Underseen.
Great movie, great message.
I guess we forgot to mention this is the Black History Month.
Yes, happy Black History Month.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a good choice. Get Out is a great movie, but everybody's seen it, so maybe this one is a little needs a few
if
more
you haven't seen Get Out, just go watch it. You don't need to hear us talk about it. It's great. Just go watch it.
Yeah, everybody's heard of Get Out. Everybody's heard of Candyman because of the remake.
The remake I really liked. The Candyman, the original and the remake, I think are both really good. Definitely see the original first.
This is a podcast about fun horror, and I'd say of those three, this is the most fun.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, nobody gets punched in the dick in Candy.
Yeah.
Maybe Spencer should stick his ugly head out and give us some kind of a signal.
Maybe looking around a little bit. Make sure it's safe.
Maybe the president is gonna make me Secretary of Pussy.
Please like and subscribe to the Win channel.
Spook Doodles was made possible thanks to generous patrons like Adhesion, PTS, Christopher Smith, Church, Clayton Scholler, Count Trashula, Jetpack Jesus, Joe Nothing Art, John Gonzalez, Lauren S., Madman, Michael Kickin' Rad Corliss, MZ, Stephen Tyndall, Vincent Modica, Choco 1980, Flavor Fibe, Freud, Graventy, Cat Miller, Leah, M. Sinistrari, Mike Dunn, P. Coffee, Garju, and Sinister Sea. If you would like to become a patron, go to Screamstream Official on patreon.com and please consider donating.